Welcome back to A Strong Recommend, where we waste your time by telling you what we wasted our time with. I'm your host, Alex Ecker.
I'm your host, Dalton Lee.
And we're going to just talk a little bit about some games that we actually let's played. And then we're going to talk about The Amazing Spider-Man 1 with Andrew Garfield. Links will be, or timestamps will be in the description. So if you just want to skip ahead to that spoiler discussion about the movie, see our thoughts about it, you can go right ahead and do that. But without further ado, we're just going to talk about some games we let's played real quick. I can't
Yeah.
speak today. Bleh.
Yeah, we're like always, we're off to a great start.
Always.
Yeah, so if you maybe stumbled upon this podcast in audio form, not on our YouTube channel, you might not know that we also release Let's Plays. I'm sure we've mentioned it in the previous episodes. You probably know. But
Mhm.
we realized that
If not,
maybe for people that are only into the podcast and don't care about
mhm.
the Let's Plays, we may as well get ourselves some free content by talking about stuff that other people already saw us play.
Yeah. And if you're listening to us on Spotify for the first time or iTunes or wherever you find your podcast, go to YouTube and look up Broccoli Bomber Studios, and that's where everything we do usually ends up.
Yeah. So, uh, oh man, we've actually been recording the Let's Plays for a while before we started recording these podcasts,
That's true.
because we're expecting to release them a lot more frequently. I say expecting, but by the time you're hearing this episode, we've been releasing daily or almost daily for a while now. Whatever, I'm rambling. Pokemon Snap is where we started.
Was it
And
Pokemon Snap? I thought it was Bushido Blade.
not Pokemon
Or no,
Snap was
no, you're right.
first.
Yeah, then
Not that it
Bushido
really
Blade.
matters, but
Bleh.
we started there because of the announcement a little while back of them finally doing a follow-up. And I say finally because this first game is from the N64. I don't remember what year exactly, but it's been a long time coming, and I don't know if the game was like financially a big deal, but it's like everyone who touched it at the time loved it and has been begging for some kind of a successor ever since, especially on the Wii U, where it seemed like a given, where
Yeah.
frankly, I'm glad they didn't, because it was the gimmick of the console that had people excited for it, right? Like Nintendo really loves to lean into, like, whatever feature this console has that's unique, as we really want games to like force it in there even when it's not really needed. And this did seem like an instance where it was kind of a natural fit where they wouldn't have needed to force it. But uh, honestly, the charm of doing it that way with Alex, I don't know if you even know what I'm talking about, but people were suggesting that holding the pad, the tablet, whatever you called the Wii U
Mm-hmm.
controller,
Yeah.
uh, people were basically imagining that that would be the camera, and they'd be like aiming it around the room to see the Pokemon.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's
I think the charm of that would have wore off in 10 minutes, and we would all be annoyed that we were doing it at that point.
I see a lot of people tripping over the cord because from what I remember, it had to be plugged in for
No,
it to work.
no,
Or
neither of us
maybe
ever owned a
maybe
Wii U, but no, that was completely wireless. That wouldn't have been a concern. But the concern
okay.
to me would have
Maybe it was just
been
the bad battery life or something like that that pretty much needed it plugged in at all times.
I people yeah, to me that wasn't going to work, because we are not talking about the original game at all. Whatever, I'm still going to finish my thought.
Go ahead.
That idea wouldn't have worked because people were frankly imagining it as being a little too similar to like how VR actually works. Like this
Okay.
premise works if it's a VR game, but with the Wii U, okay, ask yourself, what is the TV even doing while you're playing this game? If you're taking
Right.
the pictures via the tablet, what is the TV even doing? Maybe it's just showing you directly ahead, like what's on the track, if you're not familiar with this game, the original at least, and
It's like
maybe
a
the new
rail
one, I don't
shooter.
know. It's on rails, you're moving down a track, and so maybe the TV just shows you the directly ahead aim, I guess. But then,
Hmm.
what for though? Because now, like, if you're using the tablet to like seek out the Pokemon and take pictures, you're not actually looking at the TV, and the TV's not going to help you find things. Now you have a very limited field of view. You are looking for
Yeah.
Pokemon in 360 degrees around you and down and up, and actually trying to imagine in the real world, you're a photographer, right? You're going out into
Hmm.
wherever to try to take some pictures. And at the start of your trip, uh, we just duct tape the camera to your face, and you never see outside of the camera. You have to look around with the camera
There's
to
no
see
scope.
anything.
Like, yeah, you don't see anything. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not good enough to be able to see through the thing you're holding in your hands. You need to be able to
Hmm.
look around independently with your eyes. So I'm relieved they didn't do that, even though most people consider it a given.
Yeah.
The new Switch game needs to just be I don't want to say faithful because this is kind of a short, like not all that fleshed out concept. They do need to add more
Yeah.
ideas, not just new levels and new Pokemon, but a lot of new mechanics in general. Um, but a first person view camera is a perfectly fine way to handle it. Let me look around with a joystick. I don't want to hold, a mobile screen and look around with it.
Yeah. No, I agree. With the original game, what was it? You're just the one dude from the anime with all of his fingers cut off, and Professor Oak is just like, "Hey, take these pictures."
The fingers cut off makes no sense to anybody that didn't watch our Let's Play. But
Yeah. You have to watch the Let's Play to understand.
oh,
Um.
it's a simple idea. It's here's one random
Mhm.
side character from the anime, and let's roll them down the river with a camera and some pester balls, which is a weird concept.
Well.
I mean, it works as a gameplay mechanic, but the idea that here's
Mhm.
some Pokeballs, they don't function like Pokeballs. They're just hard objects to whip at small and large creatures.
Oak could have
Um,
gotten away with saying, "Hey, here's this bag of rocks," and then just throw them
right.
at the Pokemon. Like, yeah.
Right. It could have
Um,
been any hard object, really. But eh,
well, that
eh,
and the premise is you take enough pictures, get enough score, or get a high enough score to meet a certain point, and then you unlock the next level.
mhm.
You're kind of skipping ahead with the Pester Ball, because the Pester Ball was a later thing.
Well, yeah, but I wasn't giving a play-by-play explanation of
Yeah,
progressing through the game. I'm expressing that there's very little to the concept.
yeah.
The
No,
the
you're right.
the concept is ride down a level,
Yeah,
sometimes kind
find an
of
alternate
provoke
path.
situations to make you a better picture using the what do you get? You get uh poke fruit or whatever they call the food. Is that it? Poke fruit? Pokemon food?
Oh
I don't even
God.
know.
Uh,
Pester
Pokemon
ball,
crap.
flute.
Yeah, the flute.
Not a whole lot, and it's like less than a 2 hour game.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm hoping that this new game is a lot more fleshed out, that it's a lot more content, a lot more Pokemon, a lot more ways to interact with the world. Uh,
Yeah.
Maybe
I
they
would.
figure
I
out
would
a good way
like.
to make it not strictly on rails.
I was just gonna say that. I would like it to not necessarily only be on rails and maybe have some exploration areas, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
have. It would be pretty dope to see if they were like, yeah, here's the game, and it's the first level is just a tutorial,
Mm-hmm.
and you're on rails, and then at the end they're like, well, good luck, and then you're just in this big ass open world taking photos
Mm-hmm.
of Pokemon.
Yeah.
Um, Now, if I'm remembering correctly, not all of the 151 Pokemon were in Pokemon Snap. Is that correct?
Right. I'm thinking somewhere from 70 to 90 ish
Okay.
without looking it up.
Um, yeah, because there's what over 1,000 Pokemon at this point.
I think now they're approaching 1,000, and I of course don't expect them to pull that off.
Hmm.
Because I would imagine implementing a Pokemon into this game is more effort than implementing them into a main game. I don't know. Maybe not because you're not balancing
Hmm.
like attacks and leveling and whatever
Right.
combat related thought goes into a creature, but
You're just adjusting their size.
in terms of like animating them and giving them like natural behavior,
Hmm.
making them feel a bit more alive. I feel like that's asking more of them per Pokemon. Uh,
Yeah, I'm
so
not
I
expecting them to have all of them, but at least more than 90.
I'm
They would
I'm
have to
I'm
for
at least hoping it's in the hundreds. I at
it would
least
have
hope
to be.
I at
Yeah.
least hope we're talking like 300, and maybe if the game does well, uh, maybe keep adding them. Maybe add new levels that have more if the game does well and they can justify it. Um, if it's not all fleshed out like we're talking about, if it's not something that takes us more like 20 hours instead of 2,
Hmm.
I at least hope it's cheap. I want that to become more of a thing. You know, big budget studios releasing smaller games but making them cheap to help justify it.
Okay.
Like EA recently pulled that off with Star Wars Squ- Squadron.
Squadron.
Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like a $40 game on launch because they said, "Look, we know this isn't a full-blown big budget title with tens
Yeah.
or hundreds of hours of content, so here it is cheaper." That was a good precedent to set there that this should roll with if it's not a much more detailed game than the original.
Uh, I would be okay if this game was a $60 game if there's a legit like full blown out story.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh
I
yeah,
I, I
try to
think
work a real narrative into it.
right exactly. Maybe because I'm gonna get a lot of shit for this. I haven't completed really any Pokemon games
Hmm.
except for I think it was Pokemon Y. I got a decent way through Omega Ruby. I haven't played many, but the reason for me that I'm not a big thing in, or I'm not a big fan of the Pokemon games themselves, um, they kind of all do the same thing. You go through, you fight 8 gym leaders. There's a
Hmm.
Snorlax or two hiding. Um, you fight the Elite Four, and then you just go into what is it, the wilds? That I guess is the lack
I
of a
mean
better term. I can't remember the
the
name.
post game can vary wildly between them, but
Yeah.
I haven't played many myself. I grew up on the first one. I think I skipped Gen 2. I played
Hmm.
through Gen 3 one time in over a span of like 2 days and then traded the game back into a used game shop and then never touched the series again really until
Right.
Let's Go.
Right. And it's not like obviously they're doing something right. With Pokemon games. This is why I like Snap in a way because uh it's not the same thing over and over. It is the same thing over and over in its own game.
Hmm.
That's different. Um, although I do have to say, like, I appreciate more with like Pokemon Sword and Shield. Like, it looks like they're doing a lot more differently. It's not walk into the grass, find a Pokemon. It's hey, there's a Pokemon. It might chase you. It might run from you. It might do this or that. You have to work for it versus
Hmm.
it being like a guarantee. I guess is
Hmm.
the kind of the word. Um, not to mention, at least for me, Pokemon games aren't necessarily a big challenge.
No.
The only challenge in them for me is consistently staying with them to beat them because they do get very dry very quickly for me because they are the same story over and over.
Hmm.
Um, I grew up
Well, and
watching
I
the anime
think,
and
mind you, as someone who again
mhm,
hasn't really played them, like haven't
mhm,
touched them since Gen 3, played through Let's Go, started Sword and Shield. Um, maybe I'm wrong here, but this is an impression I'm under, that remakes aside, I think the story has gotten kind of more sophisticated as it went along, in the sense of, in the first game, the story is literally just, I want to beat the gym leaders and the Elite Four.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
as you keep going, there are actual stories involved, is my impression. I think you said you finished X and Y, which is a little bit later in the franchise, I
Just
believe.
Y.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
I only did Y.
well, I mean, they're the same game. That's how I refer to them.
Valid. That's a good point.
But that would, does that confirm or refute my suspicion? Like, is that more sophisticated story wise than like Gen 1?
Uh, it's been a long time since I've played it. Easily 5 years ago, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, I was going through a lot of stuff back then. It was just something I had to kind of occupy my time in
Mm-hmm.
the in betweens of whether
Yeah.
going somewhere or
Mm-hmm.
not having access to like my computer.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and anyway, Pokemon Snap
mhm.
is, it's a nice thing to like. You might enjoy like the world of Pokemon and the tone and characters, but uh, find the somewhat repetitive games, well, repetitive. And so it's
Mhm.
nice to have other things on the side. And Snap isn't the only example by any means, but it's
Right, right.
nice to have things on the side that are completely different gameplay, taking advantage of that world that you appreciate. And it's weird to me that Pokemon Snap, as appreciated as it was and is, it's weird to me that it never became like a full-fledged spin-off franchise of its own. Like with
Yeah.
Mario, there's the main games that you may or may not find repetitive. And if
And then the
you
party
just
games
and if
and
you just love Mario and
mhm.
want totally different gameplay to go with that world, well, then there's a whole Mario Kart franchise for you, and Mario Party franchise, and
Right.
sports in general you can kind of lump together. It's really weird to me that Pokemon Snap never became that.
Yeah. I'm not saying what I'm saying to like shit on the games because they're fun. I will agree that they're fun. But for me, they stopped becoming fun near the 50 to 75% mark of the game because
Mm-hmm.
at that point, I'm getting to the all right, I'm just doing this because I have to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, the newer games obviously have a lot more imagery and animation and um, the battles look
The
they still
experience
look
share helps
traditional.
with this a lot.
Yes, absolutely. I was just gonna say that. But the visuals, versus like the Game Boy games or the DS games, like yeah, some of the DS games are a lot better, but like there's the traditional sense of your Pokemon's in this corner,
Mm-hmm.
um, theirs is in that corner, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Now it's they change the camera angles and they're actually moving and doing things, and like for example with like Let's Go Eevee or Pikachu,
Mm-hmm.
um, that's mostly what I'm remembering right now because it's been the game I've been trying to get through.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the camera angles, the ability that if you have enough of a relationship established with your Pokemon, that they may dodge a move or resist poison or paralysis because they want to do good by the trainer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the just the overall like walking in the fields and seeing Pokemon everywhere and not just with some random ass gym leader, that's a big deal. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's more interaction and
Sure.
more atmosphere and it's not as dry. So
Sure.
like I think I've been kind of wanting to pull the trigger on Pokemon Sword and Shield, but that's what's been kind of stopping me is my previous attempts with the games where they overall are good and then they end up becoming a negative for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of want to, I do want to pull the trigger on it, but I don't know, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And with a game like with Pokemon Snap, like I would absolutely buy it because it's a nice change. And sure, it will become
Mm-hmm.
monotonous just like every other game,
Mm-hmm.
but it's another way to appreciate the universe that's been built.
Yeah.
And I'm very much about the Pokemon universe. It's I don't know, I dig it a lot. Like, it's amazing to me because like, uh, I watch Cinemassacre a lot on YouTube, and they recently put out a video where one of the guys in the team has his office is dedicated to nothing but Gengar, and it is the most ridiculous collection I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And you wouldn't think to collect Gengar, you know,
Yeah.
or at least I wouldn't. Like, I'm a fan of Dragonite. I like Dragonite. Don't know why. It's one of my favorite Pokemon. Uh, like I have a few things that are just specifically Dragonite.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the nice thing about it is like it's like comic books in the way where you can pick something and just follow it and only it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm kind of rambling at this point, but I'm just trying to show my sort of appreciation for the universe that's just outside of the games as well. Like
Yeah.
like I was trying to say earlier, like I grew up with the anime, I collected the cards. I didn't really have the games. Like
Yeah.
if I'm gonna be totally honest with you, my first I'm going to technically call it a Pokemon game because there's Pokemon in it. Is Smash Bros. Melee. Like that's my first Pokemon game.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I'll give it to you.
But like there's Stadium, which is the battling, but you're with friends and you can smack talk each other and you know what I'm saying? Like
And the stadium combat isn't exciting today,
mhm.
but it was very exciting at the time for it to be like
Yeah.
3D and animated, and Sword and Shield's combat doesn't look a whole lot better than the original Pokemon Stadium, but we'll save that for if we end up
If we ever get there.
reviewing that down the line.
Yeah.
But it sounds like, are we in agreement that Pokemon Snap would be a strong recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend it if you're interested in the history, like uh if you grew up in the N64 generation. I don't know what you did. I looked away for 2 seconds and oh no.
Well, maybe that means you didn't hear it either, so.
No, I heard it.
Oh, okay.
I heard dunk dunk.
Yep, don't worry about it.
All right, cool. I'll just assume that you broke everything. Uh, but if you grew up in the generation of the N64 and like have memories of the N64, even if it wasn't like during the time of it, like like I'm willing to say there's a nostalgia for the N64 style.
Sure.
Because there was many games that looked different visually, but geometrically looked the same.
It's one of the better looking N64 games. The soundtrack's really good.
Yeah, it is.
Pokemon is a franchise that it might not be your thing. Every major franchise can't be everybody's thing, but it's a big enough franchise that everyone should have some exposure to it. And although this isn't the game that's going to tell you what Pokemon really is, it's a short enough entry that you may as well give it a shot.
Yeah, but what did it take us, like maybe 2.5 hours because we screwed up and we had to do some off-air stuff to get enough points to unlock a level.
Yeah, I'm thinking it was less than 2 hours. Granted, I had a lot of the game memorized. Maybe it's more like 3 hours if you're doing it for the first time, but
probably.
But still, it's a short time investment. It's fun. It's a interesting addition to a franchise that if you're a gamer, you really should be at least a little familiar with.
Yeah, it's not one of those things that's like you had to be there to understand it and appreciate it. That's not what I was saying. I'm saying if you have a nostalgia factor for like the N64 and Pokemon, it's worth a shot. For anybody that's still a fan of Pokemon, it's still worth it. Overall, if you feel like wasting your time on something that's not going to take that long, I definitely would recommend it.
Yeah. All right, we talked about that for a good bit longer than I expected to, so I'm gonna cut what was gonna be the next Let's Play discussion. We'll push that to the next episode because I didn't expect that to fill 20 plus minutes. So on to the real topic of discussion. The Amazing Spider-Man, the next entry in our little Spider-Man marathon here. And
Yeah,
for our spotlight discussions, we ask the question in advance now, is this a strong recommend? And I don't know if I know my answer to this one yet. I'm going to let you answer first.
I was hoping you would answer first. Oh boy.
I'm going to give it a no. I'm feeling it in my heart. I'm going to give it a no. That doesn't mean I don't like it. I do like it, and I'm about to praise things about it. But
I say it's worth it in the regards that the new movie's coming, and
that
it
may or may
might
not tie into it.
right. So it might be useful to know the information.
But when we say a strong recommend on this show,
Hmm.
we're ignoring the it's part of a franchise factor, because if we're considering it that way, oh well, you got to watch it because it's tied to this other thing. Well, then we have to give an automatic strong
Right.
recommend to like everything in a universe, and that defeats the point of reviewing it. So without that in mind, uh I'm not giving it a strong recommend. I like it, but it doesn't qualify for that. Uh
Yeah, you can wait on this one. Honestly, you could probably wait on the second one. Hmm. Maybe. The second
so
one I remember being better, but you should watch the first one if you're aiming to watch the second one.
at the risk of influencing your opinion in advance, you're wrong. But about the
Probably,
second one
but
being better.
it's been a
Um
while since I've seen it. I think if I remember correctly, I was drunk for both times I watched this movie originally, and I was with you.
so my problem here is kind of the reason that I haven't rewatched these since Tom Holland's Spider-Man has been introduced. And
Hmm.
it's not that Tom Holland's is better. It's that this movie and its sequel were made pointless by being cut off abruptly in favor of Tom Holland's Spider-Man.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Both of these movies, I guess I inherently have to talk about both of them as a franchise if I'm addressing this point, but both of them suffer now from being the beginning of something that never really paid off. And I don't know, maybe this rumored MCU crossover is going to help pay it off a little better. But at the moment, this is an origin story to a story that never finishes. And I never
Yeah,
went back to it because I just knew I was going to feel that it was going to paint what I was feeling while watching it. This movie comes at a point where, excuse me, superhero movies aren't meant to stand alone anymore. They are all started with the assumption that they will be a franchise.
right.
Unlike like Raimi's Spider-Man, where they planted seeds for the future, but they said like, oh, we got to start with Green Goblin in case we don't get to make any more. We got to start with Mary Jane in case we don't get to make any more. They knew they were intending this to be a franchise, and it's built that way, and you know that franchise is never coming. And it
Yeah.
makes it really
Hmm.
hard to care while you're watching this.
I mean, if you can isolate yourself from that knowledge, they're still good movies. Like from my memory,
Mm-hmm.
like I have to say they're worth watching more than the Sam Raimi movies.
And I still like this movie, at least. We'll see about two,
Yeah.
because two I
Hmm.
had a difficult time with even at the time. Um,
Uh.
this one I still like it,
Yeah.
but I would also never read, well, not on purpose, the first three chapters of a novel and go, that was really good, knowing the rest of the novel isn't being written. Like,
Hmm. I mean, didn't you read all of Game of
if
Thrones
if
up
that
to
makes
what's been
sense.
written?
Like, yeah, like I've had a really hard time convincing myself to start that series, even though I
Yeah.
bought the first novel years ago. I've never convinced
Hmm.
myself to start because I'm not convinced it's going to get finished. And even if somebody thinks the ones that exist, or maybe the first couple, are like some of the best fantasy books ever, if you know that an ending's not going to come, that has to paint what you're experiencing while you consume
Yeah.
that media. And that's what I'm experiencing here. I just don't care because I'm not going to get to an ending. And it's a shame because I think Andrew Garfield's really good and
Yeah,
Emma Stone
he's
is really
he's
good.
I will agree that Emma Stone is way better than Kirsten Dunst in the regards of being
Mhm.
the female like sort of lead, because in Raimi's movies
Mhm.
it felt more like a plot point, and in this movie it feels like an actual character.
Mhm.
I do have to point something out, and I'm sure I might make you laugh if you know what I'm talking about. I feel like Andrew Garfield in the Peter Parker look absolutely pioneered what e-boys are today. I mean, come
I'll
on.
I'll 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 give you that. And Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland, both of them are if somebody says Tobey Maguire is the best Peter Parker, not Spider-Man, but Peter Parker,
Hmm.
it's because like appearance wise and just like not having a cool factor, not being
Yeah,
someone that female fans swoon over. He's a
right.
bit more faithful in that regard. And Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield do both suffer from looking at them and being like, there's no way this is a bullied nerd kid.
Yeah, yeah.
But I say that Andrew Garfield is better because, besides being a better Spider Man rather than Peter Parker,
Hmm.
it's not that he's a better Peter Parker, it's that he's a better actor, at least compared to Toby at this point in his career. I've seen Toby in other things and he's great too.
Yeah.
But strictly speaking of these movies, whether Andrew Garfield's a more faithful Peter Parker or not, he's just a better actor. I believe him immediately. I don't believe that he's getting bullied in high school, but when he
No.
speaks, I
He's
believe him.
got he's got the right demeanor and sort of vernacular that Spider-Man needs. Or
Hmm.
or rather maybe dialect would be a better word, where he knows the right time to stop making noise with his mouth, like uh
His
that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
his Peter Parker is a little too close to his Spider-Man. His Spider-Man, unlike Tobey Maguire, is very accurate and faithful in terms of his like
Mhm.
jokes and attitude and just kind of general tone. And then
Yeah.
his Peter's a little too close to it just because Andrew Garfield's a little too cool.
Yeah, I don't picture Peter Parker with a skateboard. I don't. I picture him with a scooter and a helmet and knee pads and elbow pads and still waiting for Aunt May to pick him up after high school and not riding the scooter home.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
I wonder. I don't know. For the record, I believe the skateboarding was Andrew Garfield's idea. But I don't
I
know,
mean,
maybe
for
mixed
this setting,
feelings.
it makes sense, but like,
Maybe
and like
kind of mixed
the
feelings there cuz on one hand I like that
mhm.
him being a skateboarder helps add a little bit of believability to like him getting real experimental with his powers. Like it adds up that he would
Okay.
decide to do these like acrobatic kind of things based on like having already been doing
Mhm.
something like skateboarding. So
He'd
I
have a
like
little more
that little touch.
coordination.
Yeah, so I like
Yeah.
that little touch. At the same time, I'm thinking to myself, is skateboarding cool? And I'm not sure because in the 90s when we were playing Tony Hawk, yeah, skateboarding made you real cool. And Sony probably thought it was real cool when they accepted the idea of having them do it. But
Mhm.
in 2012, is skateboarding cool?
I hope hoverboards aren't that cool still. Although there's those they're not the hoverboards, but they're the plank with like just the wheel in the middle,
Hmm.
and you lean this way or that way, and it doesn't like it's not shifting your ankles, it's shifting
Mhm.
your weight left or right. They go, those seem cooler than the hoverboards, but you never see people biff and destroy their whole entire career in one video on one of those. It's
Is,
only the
is that
hoverboards.
what's cool about skateboarding?
No, it's cool. What's cool? I'm not gonna get into skateboarding. All right,
Is the
let's.
potential to die anyway?
It's either you die or pull it off. Um, but I
But see how we're
this.
simultaneously pointing out that, like, okay, Andrew
Mhm.
Garfield is not a faithful Peter Parker, but like we're still calling him better than Toby just because the acting is better. And as for the way
It's
Spider-Man's
comfortable.
written,
Yeah.
yeah, as for how he's written, not how he's being played, like we have the actual web shooters now,
Yeah.
not
Um.
organic, so they're not shying away from showing off his intelligence. Like he is
Mhm.
nerdy, like
He's more like the robotics team versus the after school chem lab.
yeah, Andrew Garfield, like being like attractive and funny and cool, like that doesn't mean he can't be a nerd in terms of being smart. It means he's not a nerd in terms of getting bullied, likely. I mean, we're speaking in stereotypes and
Hmm.
generalizations here, but it doesn't make it less likely that he'd be like a science nerd. So it's cool that they
Hmm.
kept that in there.
Well, think about the settings too. Like early 2000s, stereotypes were still a big thing with nerds and jocks and this and that. And in this movie, they tend to shy away from it. Like this movie was what 2000
2012.
2012. Uh, and that was kind of like the point where it was like, hey, I can be cool and smart too, was starting to be a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and if you notice, like, he's not really picked on or bullied for being a nerd. He's picked on or bullied because he pesters or stands up to the bullies. Like in the scene where the I don't know what the jock's name is. Is that Flash?
It's Flash again. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
When
Flash
he's
again.
like shoving that kid's face, like holding him upside down and shoving his face into the tray, and he's like, "Hey, just leave him alone." And then he calls him by his real name, Eugene, and then he gets pissed because like he's not picking on him because like oh he's doing something innocent. He's actually sticking up for someone. It's
So
he's not a target. He's not a target
yeah,
himself.
so was this change basically a way of saying like, hey, we realize he's too cool to really be Peter
I could see
Parker.
that.
And so even when he's interacting with what we're going to consider his bully, we're still just going to let him be kind of cool because the actor's too cool. so
I could absolutely see
so
that
I
being
guess
the
he suits
direction.
what they actually wrote for him, even if he's
Hmm.
not really, original 60s comic book Peter Parker.
Hmm. Yeah, because in Sam Raimi's, he was directly a target for anyone to just, do
But so
whatever to
speaking
pick on
of,
him.
yeah, so speaking of Flash being here again, we have the other little dilemma of not just this version of the franchise being cut short, but the fact that it's kind of redoing and reestablishing a lot of stuff from a movie that was only 10 years prior.
Hmm.
Uh, us watching these right after Raimi's Spider-Man, I this was another reason I had a really hard time caring going through the origin story again. And it's strange, it didn't bother me at the time. I maybe just because I was younger and dumber and superhero movies were still a bit more exciting for me then than they are now. But when they announced that they were doing this reboot, and I saw so many people complain that, oh man, we're gonna have to watch this origin story again. Or I even saw people refer to this as a remake. Oh, they're remaking the original. No, they're not. This is not a remake of Raimi's Spider-Man.
Right. Hmm.
It's just another Spider-Man movie. But
Right.
at the time, I didn't see the complaint because to me, it didn't matter that we already know Spider-Man's backstory. We're seeing a new Spider-Man in a new universe here, and whether they make a lot of changes to the origin or whether they keep it largely the same, I I just felt like we needed to see it for this instance of the character to know what is different or what is
Yeah.
the same and to connect with the significance of his backstory. This time around, I really didn't feel like I wanted it. I really wanted the origin stuff to just be over with. The
Hmm.
Tom Holland movies skip over the origin completely. They occasionally reference it for a sentence or two, but they trust that you already know it and skip over and don't care. And I was watching this time
Yeah.
wishing they would have done it.
Oh, dude. Speaking of origin story, it still hurts me to this day that they couldn't have just had Uncle Ben say, "With great power comes great responsibility." Like the "great power comes great responsibility" speech. It felt like it felt right. Like the point was made fairly well. It
Mhm.
was just that has been a trope of Spider-Man, and maybe that's my problem. But
They were really awkwardly trying to avoid saying it
yeah,
to not have too much overlap with the original movie. And if they weren't going to say it, I wish they hadn't went for their weirdly close approximation of it,
yeah,
where he kind of not really says it and you're like, we know what you meant, man. Just say it or don't.
just either do it or don't. Yeah.
The one thing
Um.
I'll give them in defense of that decision is that technically in the comic where that comes from, Amazing Fantasy number 15, his origin story, technically Uncle Ben never says it, it is the narrator. So
Okay. Yeah, that's
I'll
fair.
give him that slight caveat, but we heard him kind of sort of pretend not to say it. So
Right. Um. uh. Before we go on any further, do we want to talk about any other actors? Like, I don't have much to say about anyone else because I mean, let's be fair. There's like five main characters in this movie.
the only other person I'm gonna call a main character is Dr. Kurt Connors, the lizard. And
Okay.
I don't know if I'm gonna say this actor's name right, but Riz Ifans? Ifans? I have no idea.
Sorry, buddy. We know you. We know
Sorry.
you're listening to our podcast right now.
I'm not like just looking up the name for the first time. I've known the name since back when this came out, but I just never like watched an interview to hear someone say it. I don't
Yeah.
know. Um I would really call him the only other
Hmm.
major character that needs to be talked about, and he does fine for what he's given.
Yeah. I feel like there was a
The
sort of
lizard
gap
story
in the
isn't
ramp up.
compelling, but he's fine.
Yeah. I like what they did. I like what he did with the character, but I feel like he went from I'm trying to create humanity to, or I'm trying to save humanity to, I'm trying to create perfection way too fast.
Mhm.
And I mean, sure, some of that could be, science fictiony. This drug thing that he's taking is making him crazy, whatever. But explain it. You know what I mean? Like there was no explanation for this mystery drug that was like, oh, it's known to have psychosomatic things, or
Mhm.
maybe I'm just nitpicking that, and maybe it's a way of them showing not telling. But I feel
Yeah,
like
it's
there could have been a little bit more.
yeah, it's not that I feel like they didn't give me enough to understand the story or his motivation or anything. It's just
Hmm.
I don't really care, and there's not something particularly bad about him in that it's just if I were to ask you right now to name the 15 best comic book movie villains you've seen, you might struggle to come up with 15 of them, but he would never cross your mind. He the
No.
character, not he the actor. He's fine.
Hmm.
And it's not because anything's wrong. It's just that nothing was particularly good. I just don't care about this guy, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, in the movie he's great. Outside of the movie, it's the character, not the actor. Um,
Mhm.
uh, how do you feel? Do we are we good on talking about the actors here? Do you want to move on to something else?
I mean, everyone else is fine. I don't think anyone else is important enough
Yeah,
for the level of detail we go into to need
right.
elaborating.
Uh, how do you like Spidey's suit in this movie?
You know what? It actually occurred to me looking at his suit that we never mentioned the suit for the Raimi movies, which was pretty much perfect already. They kind
Yeah,
of nailed Spider-Man visually on film immediately, and then they got here and they kind of needed to do something different. And so of all the existing Spider-Man movies, this one is the most different. And a lot of people made fun of it for its like weird like basketball texture, but I like it a lot. It's not really based on anything
yeah,
particular from a comic book. I just read it as it was supposed to look a bit more like something he could have made, which don't get me wrong, it doesn't. Every superhero
no,
costume is like a multi-hundred thousand, if not millions of dollar work of art from some
right,
factory that makes work of art costumes, but for the like level of believability you agree to give to a superhero movie when you
right.
watch one, relative to everything
I
else, it looks a bit more like something he could have made, and I like the approach.
I I don't buy that at all. The he made it himself. No, because it's how does something look dark and shiny all at the same time? The eyes really bugged me because it felt like
Hmm.
because I swear at one point he takes sunglasses out or the lenses out of the frames and put them in the eyes,
Hmm.
but then he decides to drill holes in them.
Hmm.
Why?
I I don't remember.
You know what I mean? Like it's
I
purely
don't
an
remember.
aesthetic thing, and
Keeping in mind I was half invested watching this. I don't
yeah,
find it believable that he made it, and it doesn't necessarily make sense. I'm just saying that that's a
no.
caveat that I give to that you have to give to any
Hmm.
superhero movie. The exceptions basically being kick ass. Like
Well, yeah.
or
But
or to
I
be fair, Marvel would eventually uh give Tom Holland Spider-Man through flashbacks, would give him a like literally something he could have made before Tony Stark gives him his real suit. So
mhm.
Marvel did decide to go there in Homecoming.
Yeah, yeah.
Civil War might have shown it a bit too. Um,
I don't remember. Um, it's been a while since we've watched those,
yeah.
but
Anyway, but
visually, like
I think
the
it.
suit looks good until you look at it in detail.
Hmm.
Um, I I don't know. I guess we're talking about visuals now.
Oh yeah, sure.
Um,
Lizard looks bad.
yes. Um, well, Lizard doesn't look bad until you look at his face.
Sure.
Um, I visually too. What was frustrating about this movie to me too was it was awfully dark. Not
Hmm.
in like themes, but in visuals. It was so damn dark.
Hmm.
Like there were frequent times while I was trying to watch the movie to pause the movie, try and cover my windows up, and then hope that I could see more of the movie.
Yeah.
It was just uncomfortably too dark of a shoot. And I mean, to be fair, most of the movie, well, not most of it, but there's a good chunk of the movie where like Pete's looking for revenge and it's all at night and whatnot. And that makes
Hmm.
sense, but there's a thing that you can do to turn up the brightness on a movie somehow, I'm sure. Like I don't know. Um
They when we discussed the first Raimi Spider-Man, I brought this up. I don't
mhm.
remember if it was during the episode or before,
It was
but
probably during.
2008 The Dark Knight comes out, and then nearly every movie afterwards people are trying to figure out how they can explain that, oh, it's just taking all of its inspiration from The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight changed everything, and now everything with a night scene is imitating it. And this movie may or may not have actually been trying to like adapt that as part of its tone. Like The Dark Knight
Yeah.
is, well, takes place at dark nights. And that may or may not have been what they were trying to do here, but everyone saw the trailers and went, oh, here's our gritty Spider-Man reboot. And I disagree that in like a thematic sense it's any darker than Raimi Spider-Man, but in a
Yeah.
visual sense, it is. And I brought that up before to point out that the Sam Raimi movies have a lot more uh, dark scenes than people
Yeah.
realized, like before The Dark Knight. Uh, but there, I think it was done to help, disguise rough early CG. And in here, it was a stylistic choice.
Yeah, yeah.
I said
There
the
the
lizard
CG
looked
looks
bad
good.
in that. Yeah, I said the lizard looked bad. I meant in that I don't like his design, not in that it's
Design.
not well implemented. I think this is the first Spider-Man movie to where, like, okay, we can tell looking at it that it's not a 2020 movie, sure, but in terms of like how to animate Spider-Man, at least,
Yeah.
they basically got it as good as it's gonna get here. Like, I don't see a dramatic CG improvement happening that makes this Spider-Man look worse with time.
Yeah, I you can only go up from this particular spot, and even towards like the second movie with Raimi, like during the day they did CG and it still isn't
Hmm.
terrible, but it's not great. This would have been just fine if they did it during the day in any of it.
Right,
I would have
right,
liked to have
and
seen
then
more
that's
daytime
why I
stuff.
say I think it's yeah, that's why I say I think it's a stylistic choice here because the
Hmm.
CG work was fine already. At least I don't know, maybe Lizard's questionable, but at least for Spider-Man himself, like
Yeah, he's fine.
in terms of how to convincingly animate a CG Spider-Man, he's already well there at this point.
Hmm.
They really had no need to hide anything. Um, there are a few particular shots that I really, really love that I think look really, really good. I love uh, Spider-Man lowering himself into the sewers and kind of resting in the middle of his webs
Oh yeah,
and kind
yeah.
of listening and feeling for the lizard, and then all the little lizards come running in. I think that shot is super cool.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that one's a really good one.
I I love the ending shot where he like swings up into the air in kind of slow mo and stops in front of the moon in a cool pose.
Yeah, yeah, that part was really cool. Those are some really
There's
good areas of
individual
the movie.
Yeah, there's individual shots that really stick in my
Hmm.
mind, whereas in the Raimi movies, shots only stick in my mind if they're memeable.
um, Now, as far as continuing with the visuals here, I liked the fact that they actually showed Peter get real beat up and not just like a busted lip and he was fine the next day. Um,
Hmm.
like the actual like legit damage, like when Lizard claws across his chest
Hmm.
and like that shit like ow. you know,
Yeah.
Whereas like you drop like an entire building on Peter Parker in Sam Raimi's movie, he loses part of his mask. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? And I mean, definitely that's a stylistic thing too. But like I actually like that there's detail of injury and viscera,
That
where like
that's also been a
Spider-Man
slow
frequently gets
change
hurt in the
through.
movies, or not in the
Yeah,
movies, in the
that's
comics.
also
He
been a
gets hurt a
slow
lot.
change through comic book movies in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because there's a little bit of that in Raimi's Spider-Man, and then like you can kind of track it along the MCU where the further it goes time-wise, the
Mm-hmm.
further they're willing to get in terms of like blood and gore.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a cultural change.
Oh, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I don't know. There's I don't really have anything else to say about visuals. Like, if I'm being honest, the biggest
Mm-hmm.
thing I'm trying to stay away from is how did the story go? Like, you summed it
I
up pretty much in 2 minutes, and none of the like the only like good character development is just Gwen and Peter, and obviously that's the only character development you're gonna get aside from him and Aunt May. And even then, like, it's so with Aunt May and
and I
Peter,
don't
it's
want to
like,
under like I don't want to undersell how well those two worked though. As much as I'm saying
yeah,
that like the story here is totally meh and characters don't necessarily go anywhere.
the
When
banter
this
between
movie
them is
came out,
fantastic.
people really thought this version of Spider-Man was going to cross over into the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
Um Actually, there's reason to believe that they were really trying and it just fell through. Excuse me.
Uh,
Um and I was excited for it because like I don't know, I like Tom Holland, but Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone were like good enough that for me I'm
yeah,
like, yeah, these are the characters. Use these, throw these into the MCU movies, make them legit. They did great. I didn't have any hangups. I think Tom Holland is better. I don't know. I'm even conflicted about that. I really like Andrew Garfield's too. I don't even necessarily want to say that Tom Holland's better. It's just different.
yeah,
And they're both great and good enough for these, but uh my point is the movie's kind of boring, but those two are both really good. They're
yeah.
worth watching for that. I think this director, Mark Webb, I couldn't name you one other thing off his filmography without looking at it, but I seem to recall from the time uh, people finding it to be a peculiar or at least interesting choice because he was more known for like indie, like maybe romance kind of films.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know how accurate that is. I don't know any of his movies, but he was certainly not doing action movies. He was doing more kind like spice of life kind of movies, and that shows through these two characters, and that part of it paid off. I think the stuff that's not working is purely on the writing side and not the directing.
Yeah. Honestly, if you were to ask me tomorrow what this movie's about, it's probably what I'd say today. Uh, Kid has a crush on a girl, gets beat up a lot in school, gets superpowers from a spider. There's a lizard. Uh, yeah. Like, the story is really not memorable. I almost said
Hmm.
rememberable. Yikes. Um, but yeah, the character development between those two is good, and I think paid off a lot more in the second movie, which
Hmm.
um I don't know, man. I'm really wanting to, because I just remember there's the scene in the second movie, which we'll keep for the second movie podcast
Hmm.
episode. But I remember being pretty drunk at your house and then standing up and just being like, "No fucking way!" Like,
Yeah.
and like I have good memories associated with that movie, and I'm afraid to go back and visit it sober.
Hmm. Yeah. Well,
Um,
and I also liked that movie when I saw it, and then I kept like letting the internet slowly change my opinion, which is what we're doing to people now.
Hmm.
I let the internet slowly point out the flaws to me, and then I became a bit more of a nitpicker and a bit more. I don't want to use the word sophisticated. I'm not a film buff. I'm not a film critic, but
No, you're the guy that goes on the internet. Actually, that's you.
more analytical.
Yeah.
I became more
Yeah.
analytical after.
Actually, oh,
Actually, the changes to his origin regarding his parents.
yeah. What is that about? I don't remember that at all.
I feel like it's something that we started off complaining that hey, this builds up to stuff and never goes anywhere. And we'll have more of that to talk about in the second one, but here it's the building up stuff with his parents. And all we really know is that there's some kind of conspiracy going on, and the precedent is that actually in the comics, um, despite the Spider-Man tattoo on my leg, it has been years, maybe like 5 or 6 years since I've really read comics. So I don't remember if this is something that's from the Ultimate Comics or if it's just something that was introduced to the main comics years and years after the fact. But
Mm-hmm.
Peter's parents are agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Sony in this movie isn't allowed to do that, but they still decided, I don't know, there's some kind of government thing. There's part of some kind of,
Yeah.
organized
So
conspiracy.
Sonny was like, they're sus.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
Yeah, that's what you
and
get here.
that never gets paid off ever.
Not really. I mean, they do more building up in the next movie, but it doesn't really pay off. I don't remember feeling like he ever really got the whole picture or that it was ever really made to matter.
Yeah. I'm remembering a coin for the second movie, and that's it.
It gets him into like a secret subway train lab or something.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm saying they do a bit more with it, and then I
Yeah.
don't feel like it really gets where it's trying to go.
Hmm.
Again, because the franchise gets cut off prematurely.
Yeah. Man,
And
it'd have
mhm.
been kind of cool to see what they would have done, like if they would have gotten Marvel to be like, yeah, you can say they're from Shield. It's cool. You know what I mean? Like,
When I said there's reason to believe that they fully intended to implement this into the MCU, what I'm referring to is it is known. I don't remember who said it, if it was Kevin Feige at Marvel, if it was somebody at Sony, but somebody said that this movie and the Avengers came out in the same summer. The Oscorp Tower in this movie was planned to show up like in the background randomly in the Avengers.
I didn't know that.
And apparently just didn't happen because it like the design and render wasn't finalized quick enough.
Mm.
And then somewhere between that and somewhere after that just not managing to happen, I guess they changed their minds about merging these.
Yeah, because we're getting into that territory of movies where like everything's like, oh, it should come together now, and
It's
this is
kind
one
of
of those
funny.
instances that doesn't pay off.
It's kind of funny the Spider-Man movies getting rebooted so quickly that the
Mm.
MCU starts the year after the original Spider-Man trilogy ends. And then we have a whole second set of Spider-Man movies that is ignored in the meantime, and then the MCU lasts long enough that we are like 5 years into a third Spider-Man. That the MCU
Right.
has a longevity through all three versions that isn't going to stop anytime soon.
Right. That's actually really funny. But
And I'll randomly hear people talk about the idea of like rebooting particular characters. So
mhm.
like they need to figure out creatively what they're going to do with Black Panther without Chadwick Boseman now. And I'll hear people
Oh
say,
yeah.
"Oh, they'll reboot Black Panther 10 years down the line." Or uh Iron Man. I've heard people suggest that, oh, if Robert Downey Jr. is not doing them, well, Iron Man's still a cash cow. They'll reboot him in 10 years, as if the appeal is Iron Man and not Robert Downey Jr. And people aren't getting that, no, this is all a franchise now. You can't reboot one thing. it's
Right,
all
exactly.
it's all stuck together now. I guess DC's proving me wrong by doing an extra Batman off to the side. That's how much Batman's their cash cow.
Yeah, that's fair. Aren't they going to give the role of Black Panther to his sister in the movies?
That's the theory.
Mm,
All they've confirmed is that they're not recasting T'Challa, so I'm taking that
good.
as a given that they pass it on to Shuri. Um, I think I'm done here.
Yeah, you're making me want to talk about interesting movies. Not this one. Um,
Fortunately, spoilers for our future thoughts. There's really only one bad Spider-Man movie left. Oh shit, I forgot we have to do Venom. Eventually. We
and
might
with
not be in a
that,
hurry for that one.
like and subscribe and click the bell and follow and share and don't watch this
I mean, watch it. It's fine.
movie. Don't watch it if you're not interested. Just don't.
Light recommend.
It's cool.
Thanks for watching.
Light,
See you next
soft
time
recommend.
with The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and talking over each other. Bye.